Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Library Access, a Keyforge podcast brought to you by thekeyforge.com, the number one Keyforge fan site on the internet. With me today, I have Alex and Steven, and today we hope to talk about all things Keyforge. I feel like a good place to start would be the just kind of a summary of the Crucible cast, which is a short show, podcast, video kind of thing that FFG puts out about Keyforge, kind of their way of just talking directly to people and relaying news and updates and things like that. Or at least that's the idea. There's only been 2 of them. But in this episode, it's 18 minutes long. You can go check it out. It's on the Fantasy Flight Games YouTube channel. They talked about a bunch of individual card rules. They talked about organized play, which I think was like the core message. And with that was the app updates, which kind of tied right into the organized play. Did you guys get a chance to catch that?
Yeah, watched it a little bit this morning.
I did not, but I saw it summarized in a few places.
Okay. Yeah. And that was kind of the idea here, was just to summarize it a little bit. I'll be honest, I didn't catch all the rule stuff. I have a spreadsheet that somebody put out there that is like really super good about it. It lists all the cards, then it has a section for any potential rulings or interpretations or whatever, and they hash that out. I'll include a link to that in the description. It's actually a really handy thing to have. On my phone, I created a little like home screen icon for the rule book and for that spreadsheet. So it's like at our events, we don't have any official, rule people. So it's nice to be able to call on that, when there's any kind of discrepancies. But they talked about those rulings, and they talked about organized play, a little bit about how that's going to work and how the app is going to tie into that. And that's what I paid most attention to. I was hoping they'd make some mention. I was hoping, but I knew it was unlikely that they would make some mention of a potential like online way to play besides Crucible, like an official way. They did not, but they basically mentioned, what the Amber Shards vaguely are going toward. I don't know. Do you want to sum that up for us? You listened to it, correct?
Yeah. So more or less, the Amber Shards, by the sound of it, are going to be used for prize wall support, like they've done in past Fantasy Flight games, where they'll, you can spend your shards for specific Keyforge swag, or depending on the event, you could also use them for different. They used to do out like tickets and such that you could just use at a prize like swag vendor. But it sounds like this is going to be all just specifically Keyforge, and it's going to be all self-contained. And it also sounds like they're going to be using the keys that you unlock for entry into specific events as well. So,
Okay, that's interesting. I've heard it's been about a 50-50 split about how people feel about that. And I guess it's their own fault for assuming what it would be used for, because we were totally just left in the dark. All we knew was when you scan a deck, you get some of these Amber Shards, and you assume they're of some kind of value. I'm not sure how exactly I feel about it. I don't know what I would expect to get in return.
I would love deck names. If I could spend 6 Amber Shards or whatever to name my own deck, that doesn't matter what the deck is. I just want a deck that's, of the name that I choose.
That would be really interesting, and they're capable of that on a small scale, because I remember reading something about they were letting, I think it was like card shops, if they paid to come to this some kind of gathering thing, that the card shop owners go to, they could pay a certain amount or for their ticket and have a custom deck made for their shop, which I thought was interesting. So they certainly have the capability. I just don't know how much they'll want to open that up, and it would require a decent amount of policing, I think, so people didn't try to be clever and get around name bans, or however that algorithm works.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would be interested in that, or just a deck. Like it's like when you go to the smoothie shop and they give you a little punch card, and after you buy 10 smoothies, you get a free smoothie. I would love something like that, just something useful. And we have a little topic list. I've referenced it before for what we're going to talk about on the show. And one of the other things I have are like tournament rewards. And I kind of feel the same way about that, about these kind of lackluster rewards. And I'm not complaining, I promise. I don't care. It's the the farthest thing down on my list of things I care about when it comes to playing Keyforge. But I'm still allowed to have an opinion about it. And I mentioned this because I went to a tournament, and the prizes were, I got it. It was a little tiny baggie of metal damage counters, which is neat. But there were like not enough of them to actually use. I think there was maybe 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah, I think there's 5 in a bag.
Yeah, which isn't quite enough to use on their own. And there was some other prize. I don't know what the criteria was to give them out, but they were the like house specific chain trackers.
Oh yeah, the full art house, because they gave away house specific ones at pre-release as well, but it just had the house symbol on it. These are the ones that were the playmat, like the same that they're using the playmats for. It's the same images, just on the back side. It's just the chain counter.
At the event I went to on the weekend, I believe that like they get a kit essentially from Fantasy Flight, and then it's sort of discretion how they want to hand out what's in the kit. So literally, for coming in last place, I got a full set of the promo trackers, which was a soothing balm for having put up a big goose egg in that particular local event. But yeah, honestly, my first thought when I saw that the app was tracking the Amber Shards was this is going to relate to online play somehow. Like if they roll out their non-Crucible official service, and presumably there'd be some kind of a charge for it. I'm not sure how other collectible card games that have an online component handle that. But my thought would be that you have 10 chards and you get a free month or something to that effect. Was my first thought.
My guess, if they roll out a service like that, is it'll be free. And that's actually pretty much how it works. With Hearthstone, which kind of paves the way for online play. They've been the first one, I think, to do it really, really well. But I think they'll take a page out of Pokemon's book. And I don't know if this is actually what I think they'll do or if it's what I want them to do. But Pokemon makes you scan in your physical cards to use online. And I think this is kind of where it forks off for me, and I don't quite agree with it. I think you can buy digital only cards. But I would love I think what could potentially be perfect for it, not perfect, but perfect for people who like the physical game, is to make it where you have to buy physical decks and then you import them into the deck. And that way the online play won't cannibalize the physical play, which I think would be the concern if you can, if it's tricky because you want as many people to play the game as possible. So you would think, release it just like Hearthstone. It's free. You can get cards just by playing. You amass, to use what you just said, you amass quote unquote Amber Shards. You use those to buy digital packs and you can play exclusively online. But that, I feel like that'll cannibalize a big portion of the player base that could potentially go out and play.
Oh, I would play online all the time. I wouldn't go outside. It'd be great.
Right. Well, I mean, seriously, if you had that as an option, would you still go play in person?
For major tournaments and stuff, like you were saying about the tournament, I got 6th place at my local game store, which was middle of the pack. I think it was either 12 or 14 players at that Archon tournament. But yeah, I only got a couple of the stun and damage counters from the kit and one of the house cards, just because of how they were being divvied up and stuff. But that swag would be enough to get me to go out and play in person. I mean, otherwise.
But you wouldn't go to Monday night Keyforge at your shop?
Not every light night that I've been doing, because I've gone to every Keyforge night that my local game store has. But I mean, if I could do it in the comfort of my own home, I'd have a lot less incentive to go out to the community building days.
Interesting. What about you, Alex?
I have a relatively busy schedule, so being able to play online, like even just with the Crucible right now, has been really crucial in getting me super invested in a short period of time in Keyforge. And I think having an app that presumably would have better control over things like net decking and so forth would even increase like the value of that experience for me. At the same time, I had such a wicked good time like meeting other local players, talking with them in person, having like a real personal experience rather than just sort of a chat window experience with the people I was playing against. It would be nice to have the option to do either. But I feel like it's sort of like it's in the middle, sort of what you mentioned. prioritize the physical product as a thing that you go to your local game store and purchase, and there can be a point of interaction there while you're purchasing it. Hopefully you see that they're having a local event, you get interested, you meet a local community and start working through it that way. But then also have this available as just sort of a thing where it's just like, oh, it's 10 o'clock at night and you got to go to bed in an hour because you got to get up for work tomorrow. Okay, great, let's hop on the app and play a couple of quick games with the deck I picked up the other day. I think both is probably optimal. Both avenues.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think both is a very good like optional base, and some people want more physical, some people want more digital, and having access to both is the correct answer. Like I think when they get the app up and going, it'll be a perfect mix of the two if there is an online component to the app.
So here's the question, though. When it comes to digital purchases, I mean, do you, in your perfect Keyforge world, do you allow that, or do you, require them to buy physical decks and then register them on the app, or do you let them, go to the digital store and spend $10 to get a digital only deck that only exists online, potentially, cannibalizing the physical sales altogether?
I don't think it's cannibalizing the physical sales though. If they're still getting, the same $10, or even if it's, $8 to cut out the cost of the card making, it's not cannibalizing the sales at all. It's actually lessening your purchase because at any time they can just be able to turn the switch off and you don't have that deck anymore. Whereas the physical things are going to be here, as long as the paper still works on them.
Sure. Yeah, I guess that's fair. And from a business perspective, I guess you wouldn't really care. Like it's, whether they say it's in their mission to have people, meeting and playing and all that, like it really doesn't make any difference at all whether they're buying, spending X amount online or X amount in person. Like they can still run digital tournaments, things like that. I guess you're right. It's only from players, the perspective of somebody that really wants to play in person that would care about that. As far as their wallets are concerned, they make the same amount of money. So that's an interesting thought. So I guess, I don't know. Do you, I guess that's your personal preference. What way do you think they'll do it? Do you think it'll be an online component where you can also purchase digital cards or packs, decks, I guess? Or do you think how do you think they'll handle it, I guess is what I'm asking.
My guess is that they're going to stick with you have to go out and buy a physical product. I don't know if that's a marketing consideration. Like I said, just getting people into stores, getting them involved in a local community, building the game that way or not. But it seems like they've really gone a ways towards making that a focus and working around the limitations of having it be a game where there's no card substitution. Like the entire premise of unique decks seems so focused on that idea of a physical product that it would seem a little weird to me to go around that, even though, as you guys have pointed out, there's literally no difference between spending $10 on a physical deck or a virtual deck if they operate the same way in that virtual space. But my guess would be that they're going to stick with the purely physical product, at least for the next little while.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. And you can also see in the card design, too, that I think there's only one card I can think of off the top of my head that requires a random access, which is Mind Barb. Whereas if they were going to be pushing more towards the digital field, just like Hearthstone, they have a lot more ability to do RNG things. So I think that them only having the one card shows that they want to keep it in the physical realm as much as possible.
I'm wondering if maybe another possible thing that they could try and sort of exchange Amber Shards for or monetize in some way would be purely cosmetic things within their online community. I mean, I know with Xbox Live and the PlayStation equivalent, people will literally like pay actual currency to get cool things for their online avatar. I'm not sure if that would be a thing that would be appealing to Keyforge players, but it certainly might be a thing that they could offer in exchange for, redeemable cards that you win at local events, Amber Shards, what have you.
I mean, yeah, I could see something like that definitely taking off. Just something. It sounds weird to say more practical, but the idea of swag doesn't really interest me a whole lot. Depending on what it is, I saw a thread on Facebook asking like what your ideal tournament rewards would be, and I was interested in the thread because I didn't care a whole lot for what I got. I think the metal damage counters are cool if I had more of them. If I have two sets of them and I can actually use them, sure, that's a cool thing to have. It beats the heck out of cardboard. But the chain tracker, it's useless to me. It's a cool collectible. It'd be cool if I had a set and I could, store them away somewhere. Not a binder, because I don't have a binder for cards, because it's not how this game works. But if I just think they're kind of a silly thing to have, and I can't use them. I don't really know of anyone that tracks chains that way. But if you could replace that with something more practical, what would you prefer, as far as a tournament reward or a participation thing or whatever?
See, I'm the exact opposite of you. I want all that swag. I want all that cool stuff. Like, it's not that it's super useful or not. Like, I enjoy the ones that are super useful more.
Hmm.
But I'd rather have it in my collection just to say that I have this. I won this wild wormhole playmat. I may never use the playmat, but I have it.
A playmat seems useful to me. Like the things I would want would be, a playmat, deck boxes, card sleeves, things like that. Things that actually, I'll use every time I play.
They didn't do card sleeves, but they did about the same thing with Netrunner. Because when Netrunner tournaments, the top 4 got a deck box of whatever theme it was for the kit. The first place would get a playmat, and everyone got a card that they could use. But that was, you could slide those alternate art cards into a deck, which is something you can't do with Keyforge, obviously, unless they give you a deck as the prize.
Right. Even then, I wouldn't mind that. If I got a cool holographic wild wormhole that I couldn't actually use, but it's a cool collectible kind of thing, like for whatever reason, that holds more value to me than a chain tracker card. Just it's something cool, and it's especially if it's particularly unique. Everyone and their brother has these chain tracker cards now, so they're common as common gets. Right. So it'd be cool if they did these kind of limited runs of, certain holographic cards, and they weren't intended for official play or anything, but you had them. I think that would be a cool thing.
I'd be okay. So they also say in the competitive rules that you can sleeve in or use any of the alternate art stuff. I mean, I don't know anything higher than store championship level, but if you had the physical card with the Archon name on it, I wouldn't care if you slotted in a fancy wild wormhole that you got from a tournament or any card. I mean, as long as you have the card there to represent, be like, yeah, it's part of the deck, it belongs here. Sure, and that'd be a cool way to show off, that hey, I won this. Like, it's a matter of pride getting the swag more than it is the swag itself.
I wouldn't mind that, and I would enjoy it. I just worry about then you start getting into a weird logistical area where you have people trying to cheat and people trying to swap cards out that don't actually exist, and maybe not at all. But if if you introduce the possibility for people to alter their decks like that, which they already can, I guess there's introducing that doesn't change that. But then you've got officials at tournaments having to look at your deck list and then check the cards off on it. Maybe you're required to come with your deck list in order before you shuffle, so they can quickly confirm that the cards are what need to be in there. But like I just said, that's I guess the having alternate art or whatever and letting people slip that in doesn't change that. People could still cheat, and I'm wondering if that's going to be a thing. And I'm sure it is, actually. I'm sure somewhere
Somebody will try it. Though I don't think it's going to go far because every single card has a name on it.
Right. I mean, yeah, but how frequently do when have you ever looked at your opponent's card close enough to look at, check the deck name on the bottom?
I trust players that I play against.
Yeah, but I was going to ask, in the games that you've played live and in person, have you ever picked up, your opponent's deck list to actually check it against what was played? Or, I looked at a couple of them, but it was just a very casual perusal, let's see what I'm going up against or what this deck is made out to be. And everybody was very chill about it. I almost wonder also if there isn't opening the door to potential bootlegging possibilities. I mean, it's not impossible to create bootleg cards, especially if you have, 36 of them to work off of as a template. But I mean, I guess that's a problem with any kind of organized play for card games is how do you know how legit something is? There's no hologram or anything else that would be difficult to replicate here. At a certain point, you're just going to have to accept the fact that if somebody's cheating, they might not get busted on it.
That's true. And hopefully Actually, on that note, I think we're safe there because of the app. If the companion app functions as it should be very verifiable that your deck is a real deck. The QR code should. Well, no, I guess I'm wrong, because you could forfeit it down to the QR code. You can generate a QR code. I can generate a QR code to go to any deck. That's an interesting thought. And there, like you said, I haven't really sat down and looked at the card in a magnifying glass. But like you said, there's no holographic inlay. There's no anything that makes it kind of non-counterfeit a bowl.
Yeah, and with how many combinations are, if somebody could actually figure out how the QR codes are being there, they totally could. But I think that's a giant case of the juice being just much, much not worth the squeeze.
Right.
I mean, if you're trying that hard to get 16 Nephil seeds and 16 library accesses, like, go for it. You win. Go for it. You go nuts.
That
Right.
deck would be
Yeah, and
terrible to play.
Oh, it'd be awful. It'd be absolute garbage. That's what I'm saying. Go for it.
Yeah. Well, that brings me into my, you were talking about people picking up your cards. That brings me to my next topic, in-person playing etiquette. And I don't really have any questions or anything particular to say about this. More just, what are your thoughts on it? Do you have any interesting horror stories, anything like that? I don't know. And I guess I'll provide some context. I'm a super nice guy. I'm not a weird nerdy guy. I don't, freak out about cleanliness, anything like that. I'm a social person. I'm not socially inept, if you get what I'm saying. But I don't like people touching my cards. Not if I trust them, if I know they're going to treat them well, yeah, here's a deck, here, play with it, shuffle it, do what you want. But I've encountered, for my first time as an adult. I used to play Pokemon Yu-Gi-Oh, and I saw this a long time ago, but I was too young to care or whatever. But as an adult, my first time on Monday, a fella picked up my cards kind of without asking. I mean, we were playing together, and he just grabbed it up, flicked it a half dozen times with his finger to get it off the table, and then kind of fingered it around, looking at it, and threw it back down. But how do you guys feel about that kind of interaction that's implied, that people, some cards suggest you just grab their card and put it in your archive, or that, discard a random card from their hand by them just yoinking it out of your hands? Does that bother you? Am I alone here?
It doesn't bother me, but I think that it is super polite to ask before you touch anybody's other stuff, whether it's tokens, whether it's a card, what have you. We're still at a point now where I think some of that play there's no real culture around it yet. And as much as you can port a bunch over from other games, it hasn't totally been established for Keyforge in the specific way in which Keyforge plays. I haven't run into any scenarios in which I've had any of my creatures put into my opponent's archive, but I do have an acquaintance, somebody I went to high school with actually, whose son was playing at a local event in our hometown, and I noticed he posted on Facebook in one of the Keyforge groups that because of that, his son had lost a card out of his deck, and that deck was now essentially useless because of it. So I mean, I got to assume that at a certain point some culture is going to rise up around that. But yeah, I think just the rule of thumb would be just ask before you touch somebody else's stuff.
Right. Sure. Yeah, and that's a concern with the unique deck format. If your card gets frayed, or accidentally stolen, or some rogue person you're playing against decides to rage bend your card in half, you're really kind of screwed, unless FFG comes up with some solution for that, which they won't, I don't think, because the idea of them doing a single print on one card to send you, it doesn't seem plausible to me, unless they charge an obscene amount of money, which might not be a huge deal. If you have a deck you love, it might not be a big deal to spend $6 to get a single replacement card, but just the logistics of that, it seems really unlikely. You can also, there's the potential for, I guess it's, it's up to FFG to come out and say something like, proxies are allowed. Even in tournament play. I don't know if they would ever do that. I don't know if that's a thing that's ever happened, but there really hasn't been a case, unique deck game where that could, be a necessity. But if they were to come out and say, yeah, uh, official approved proxies, the officials of the tournament, if they confirm it's a proxy and it's the only one in the deck and this and that, maybe something like that can stop this unique deck game concept from being kind of a scary, dangerous one to play. It's a thought I had. I was playing across from that guy who kind of fingered the cards in a weird way, and he didn't seem malicious, but he was just one of those guys that I wasn't so sure about. And it was crossing. I was doing really well. Not to brag, but I was like 100% win rate that night. And I played the guy like 3 times in a row, and I was winning every time and just stomping him. And I'm honestly not saying that to brag, but just to provide context. And it dawned on me like, man, I don't know how common it is for people to rage out, but like, this guy could grab one of my cards and bend it in half, and this deck is just done. I can play it on Crucible, sure, but it kind of scared me. That I don't know. It's been something that's been on my mind, ever since then.
Oh, I was going to say there's also the strong possibility that a purely accidental thing destroys your deck. Like, is there going to be a culture around please don't bring a soda to the table because if you spill it, my deck is destroyed, or even one of my cards gets touched by, errant water dripping off of your, coat because you came in from the elements or whatever. I mean, I'll be very curious to see what kind of etiquette comes up around that.
Mm-hmm. I'm also curious, and maybe maybe the community decides on their own as far as the rules go with absolutely no touching of your opponent's cards, unless they give you explicit permission, or maybe when an interaction occurs where one person takes a card from another person's hand or deck or archive or whatever it is, that is facilitated by like the owner of the card to where you never actually touch it. I don't know. That sounds tricky. You throw a card in their archive. They want to check their archives. They have to be able to look at them. But maybe, I don't know. Maybe there's no good solution to it. I guess there's not a solution to every problem, and this might be one of those.
I think the solution is going to be sleeves. I mean, that's...
Well, sure. Yeah, I've got my card sleeved up, but like he was saying with a soda, if you drop a soda on the table, like it's getting in the sleeve.
But it helps take away a lot less of like all those other problems. Like, I can't stop someone from bending a card, obviously, but I don't care if someone fingerprints are on a sleeve or something like that. And I think that just sleeving cards is good etiquette in any game, but I think it's more so in this with the, I guess the word is frailty of the deck. In that way, it's the easiest way I can think of to explain the unique setup is that every deck is frail, and that you lose a card, the entire deck is done.
Sure. The more I think about it, I would guess that they'll come out with an official ruling on proxies, and it'll become a normal acceptable thing in the community. Your dog eats one of your cards, or your kid bends it or something like that. The idea that they'll say either that or they'll provide a solution for you to buy a new card. The idea that they would say, sorry, you're SOL, go buy another deck. I think that would leave a sour taste in too many people's mouths, because that's I haven't heard that as a concern. The game's so new, the biggest concern you hear is no constructed, things like that. But once that kind of blows over and it levels out, those are people are going to realize like, oh, this I'm holding a newborn baby, a priceless artifact in my hand, and it's very fragile, very valuable. So hopefully they come out with some kind of solution, whether it be etiquette or proxies or the ability to buy new ones.
Those little laminators you had from school, just airtight seal a card.
I mean, it's not a bad idea. It'd be a thick deck, but it wouldn't go anywhere.
It'd be safe.
It'd be good. That's right. Speaking of tournament play, what do you guys use for tokens?
Up until yesterday, I had an extremely Bojack set of tokens that I put together out of other board games that I had lying around. So stole a bunch of blood tokens out of the blood board card game and made a bunch of like paper tokens for stuns and various other things. And then yesterday, my starter kit that I ordered weeks ago finally came in the mail. So now I have the quote unquote official tokens, which, to be perfectly honest with you, I'm going to probably be replacing in pretty short order because I don't really like the feel of them. The cardboard feels kind of chintzy to me. I would like to get some of those super deluxe tokens, but I don't know if I'm down to spend like $100 on them. Because yeah, they all seem to be a little bit more on the pricey side. If somebody could come out with a good, cheap $20 solution with everything that you needed in a one-player kit, and you could get a hold of it, and it was, yeah, no, I'd straight up buy 2 sets, for me and a friend to play.
Well, boy, have I got news for you. Stay tuned on thekeyforge.com on this upcoming week, and you might be pleasantly surprised with a token flavored treat.
This
Oh,
sounds like
wow.
spoilers. Are you giving us some spoilers?
It's a little tease, something maybe, call it what you want, but just be on the lookout because I too am frustrated by the $100 sets of tokens and keys and counters, and nay, no more, I say.
And I mean, don't get me wrong. If you want to spend that much on the tokens and they look awesome, like go for it. Invest in the hobbies that you enjoy in. But like, I just got a starter set yesterday. My local game store has just been selling out of them so rapidly that I haven't been able to get a hold of one. So I've been just using my old Netrunner tokens because sadly Netrunner's dead. But they all work and they're easily distinguishable, and I'm easily to use them for. And I'm probably going to keep using the Netrunner tokens because I'm so used to them now. Unless I buy a higher quality token set, I'm not a big fan of the amount of tokens that I got from the box. I'm going to use the keys. That's the only thing I really am going to use because they've been saying that eventually keys color coding might be a thing. But other than that, the rest of the tokens, yeah, they feel chintzy. They're not easily used. I hate having a 3 as a number, personally. Like 1 and 5 is what I want it to be at. So yeah, like the Netrunner stuff, it's old, but it works, and no reason to stop using it when it's doing good.
Let me throw an idea at you guys. Do you think there's a possibility that at some point during organized play, FFG comes out and puts out a guideline saying that your tokens must conform to a certain standard to be used in organized play?
I would guess yes, because it's already been kind of a thing with the no dice, which is frustrating to me. I prefer dice, and I understand why they're not allowed, but they're a million billion times more convenient than throwing 16 little pieces of translucent plastic on your identity card as amber, than having a 20-sided die that says 16 on it.
I'm also a fan of
Um,
dice. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I am 100% hashtag go team dice. But again, yeah, it is. I don't think it's as easy to bump the table as Fantasy Flight wants to make it out to be. But I can see there are pros and cons to each.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. The rationale behind no dice is that at some high level play, they've had people like bump dice and then it interrupted play while they tried to have to like forensically figure out where they were at and make sure that people weren't trying to pull a fast one. Is that correct?
I think that's the idea, and I'm sure it has happened. I think no dice is a thing that's existed in like most card games forever. Just because it's whether it's on accident or on purpose, it is. Especially you get anything bigger than a 6-sided die, and they're pretty prone to being fumbled around. A little 20-sided die is laying on a tiny a pinpoint, and if I'm looking at my computer desk right now, and if I were just to give it a good whack, it would roll all over the place. So I think it's been a rule forever, and I totally understand why. I just know that I'm not a clumsy doofus, and I can play perfectly fine with dice. And I think and actually on that same note, I guess that like you said, yeah, to answer your question, yes, I think they will, and I think they need to put out some kind of guidelines as far as what you can and can't use for for your tokens and stuff. But I played on Monday with a fella who he made his own out of cardboard, and there's nothing wrong with it, but just the way the table was set up there, he had at one point I used the number 16 because it seems to happen a lot. Like me or my opponent will just amass a bunch of amber in a turn or two, and he had like 14, 12, 16, some giant number on his identity card of these gigantic amber tokens he created out of cardboard, and they were like 2 inches away from his from the stockpile or whatever you want to call it, the community pile of amber. And there was just a point where like I I had to question myself, just like, oh man, like where do his where do his ambers stop and that pile start? And like I think that to me seems more ripe for mistake than a dice getting bumped. And there was also a time where you know the part that bothers me the most about it, and it only really bothers me in theory, not necessarily in practice, because I haven't encountered it yet until Monday. But like I would much rather risk bumping a dice and being able to immediately look at my opponent's identity card and seeing, 5 or 12, just right there, being able to glance at it in 1 second and look away. Versus like, you know, best case scenario, I'm staring right at his amber pile and I'm like counting in my head, mouthing it out loud and starting over a couple times. He knows I'm gonna fuck with his amber. Like he knows I have something in my hand. Like he knows that's really relevant information to me right now for some reason, and he's gonna play accordingly. And the more serious you get in your gameplay, the more serious of a problem that's gonna be when people can start doing this like crazy card counting by memorizing your deck in that 2 minutes and just knowing what to look for and stuff like that. That knowledge, what's in my deck, combined with me hyper focusing on how many amber the opponent has, is going to lead them to potentially recognize something I'm about to do. That's a concern for me.
I found a way around that, just by being consistent in your asking, and also going back to what you're saying about etiquette. If you're consistently asking at the start or end of every turn for an amber count, it the first turn they might be like, okay, he's gonna mess with amber, but if you keep doing it the third or fourth time, they're gonna be like, okay, it's just natural. And the same thing with him having his amber piles like almost next to each other. Again, that's also just being considerate and being like, hey, you need to move the piles, or can you move the piles a little bit? It's easy for me to miscount and be like, oh, the store pile is your pile, and that's just etiquette in that regard. But just being consistent and asking, the first time that somebody plays against you, yeah, they're gonna be like, okay, he's gonna mess with my amber or something like that. But by the third or fourth time, at the end of the turn, they'll just be like, all right, I'll draw my cards. I have 4 amber. Go ahead.
Right.
All right, so quick follow up on that then. If FFG at some point comes out and says you have to use tokens that conform to this standard, here are the official rulings about what your tokens must be like, is it then contingent upon them to provide those tokens themselves, or a standard version of those tokens, like in or outside of the starter set? Or are they basically mandating, if you want to have guaranteed tokens that conform, you gotta buy a starter set, whether or not you want like the other decks that are included with it or not?
I would guess they would surely make it an option to go buy from them. Otherwise, there'd be too much discrepancy, and it wouldn't give shop owners the ability to confidently say no, sorry, that won't work. Because then there'd always be the like, well, what do I go buy? Like I went and bought this specifically because I thought this would work. In that way, card shops and rules and all that can state just nope. If you're when in doubt, go to the website and buy a pack of tokens. And it seems like a kind of natural progression too, because I think in a lot of cases that's why people are buying the starter sets. It's just to get those little pieces of cardboard, to have something kind of accepted to bring in and
That's
use.
exactly why I bought a starter set, just because I wanted those little pieces of cardboard in case anyone said anything. Like I didn't need to. I'm at almost 30 decks. Like I still have a booster box I haven't even opened yet, and because I want to play with all my decks I have now. But I sure didn't need the 2 extra decks that were in there. I'm not gonna say no, but I spent $40 on cardboard, and I love Keyforge enough that I'm happy with it. But there's some people who are definitely gonna disagree with that statement.
Right. Yep. And I've seen people. I don't know, I've seen all sorts of people trying different things. They'll buy the set and they'll pull the decks out of them, and then they'll go sell the open pack for $40, or they'll pull just the cardboard out of it and then sell the decks and the box and all that stuff. But no, I think in time obviously we'll find out what it ends up being. But I would guess they as these questions occur and these discrepancies pop up, I think they'll get more and more precise, or more particular about what can be used, and providing some guidelines, which will be welcome as far as I'm concerned. Then you won't have people using giant pieces of cardboard, and I don't know, the token concept just is kind of frustrating to me, just in general. I don't like the idea of having to carry around a giant bag of, tokens with me. And me personally, I don't want to have cardboard. I was thinking about this last night. I don't want to use cardboard. I want to use coins, metal coins, just because they don't get dirty and gross and wet and things like that. But for me to have, however many I need, 30, let's say I bring enough to be able to supply for 2 people just in case. I have 30 pieces of amber. I have, 15 damage counters, things like that. And just, I've got these little, at the end of it, I've got these rolls of what's essentially money, rolls of coins in my, my pocket or my backpack or whatever. It's tedious to me. I don't like having so many things. Or the people that come with, the cards for stun. Yeah, they have a whole deck of like cards that aren't like actual cards you play with. They're stuns, and it's too much, I think.
I don't disagree with you
Which
on
I
that.
guess, in what way?
No,
How?
I don't think that like having the stunned cards and stuff, like having the extra deck of those, I think that's okay. But for the token wise, like as long as you bring enough that in it is clearly designated as Keyforge tokens, like what they're made out of doesn't super bother me. I mean, it will if Fantasy Flight comes out with a like a restricted list of what the tokens need to be. I mean, that's going to be the thing that probably will happen at some point, I feel. But as long as you bring whatever tokens that you feel like you need to, like you should go and have as whichever kind that you want and the amount that you want. If you want to bring enough for both of us to have some, that's really nice of you and I appreciate it. But I should be at least at a level of play that is what most people would be going for, which is what I would assume to be like either tournament or casual, but have their own stuff. I would expect someone to have their own tokens. Now, if it's a new player and you need to share, yeah, not a problem. Like, having a little extra is never going to hurt. But I think you don't need to go for 2 players all the time. Just go with the things that you need. And if you don't think you're going to need a ton of them, you can probably get away with not having a ton of them.
I'll say this, a lot of the sets that people are selling on Etsy and so forth seem very shy on the number of tokens I would actually need to play a real game. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but, like, oh, our set comes with 3 stuns and, 4 +1 counters or whatever. And I'm like, I have never played a game in which that would have done me, entirely throughout the entire game. And if the entire point is to have consistency in recording things like shields, damage, stuns, and so forth, and you're not providing people with the actual tools that they would need for that for actual play, maybe you're coming up shy on that in your sales. I don't know.
Right. No, I've seen the exact same thing. And again, I'll reiterate that, check back on thekeyforge.com sometime this week, because we'll hopefully solve many of the gripes and complaints that people have been having about Keyforge tokens, and all that comes with it. I do have another question about kind of your like local gaming and your experiences there. If you've gone to any, how have your events been? Like, how's the turnout been for your your Wednesday Keyforge?
The weekly one that I just went to today, we had a bit of players who were going to do some board gaming stuff as well, because we have a local board game group that also meets in the same day at the same place. But yeah, my local game store, we average on the weeknights of around 6 to 10, somewhere in that range. And then the tournament, we had a Archon adaptive format tournament that just happened this weekend. And I don't remember exactly the numbers on it, but it was either 12 or 14. So we've been having really decent turnout for our area. And we're not. I'm in a kind of middling city, so having that much of a turnout for the game is relatively good. And I'm also close enough where I'm a short bus trip away from New York City. Spoilers, I'm in New York. But I'm a short bus trip away from New York City, Syracuse, Buffalo, and Rochester are a bit of a trip. But I'm definitely sure I would go out for more like store championship stuff. And I know a lot of people will come to our area for store championships as well. So it will eventually it'll definitely grow. And I'm a firm believer that 50% of the Keyforge player base is not playing the game yet.
Yeah, my experience has not been quite like that, unfortunately. I've only gone to one shop because I live super close to it, and they have 6 nights a week of Magic, and there's decent turnout for that. So I figured it'd be similar. Seems like it's just one of I think there's 3 in the area, and this is kind of one of like the bigger, better ones. Um, but the first time I came, I think there was 4 of us, 5 of us, including like me and my buddy. Second time I came, I think there was second time I came there were 3 people. Third time I came there was 2, myself and someone else, and then I was starting to lose hope. I was really getting frustrated. My store's not doing a good job of advertising it either, and I'm sure I'm being a thorn in their side by complaining about it every chance I get, politely, but still just bring it to their attention. But on Monday when I went, there were 5 people there total. Granted, 2 of them had like just bought like the starter set and were like just playing it there for the first time. But still, 5 was an exciting turnout for me, and it made me think that it would continue to keep growing.
Do you know how many decks that your game store has sold, just offhand?
Um, every Monday and Friday they get between 1 and 3 boxes, and they sell out in.
Okay, so yeah, both our game stores are selling quite a lot. I say our like I own it, but I do not own it. I've been streaming tournaments from there, but I'm in no way affiliated with the game store that I go. Um, but yeah, they've had to put a not in this recent batch, but they have put in a 3 per limit for the last batch that they got, and it's still sold out within 24 hours. Like,
Right. I wish my store would do that, even though I'm a bad guy. I go in there and I buy a box. And at this point, I do it. Like I went in on Friday and I like quote unquote camped out. I sat in there for like 2 hours waiting for him to get it because of I don't know. I got screwed out on buying it on Monday of last week. So I kind of camped out there and waited, and I just intended to buy a couple. And he said he got 3 boxes, so I went ahead and bought 1 box. I didn't feel too bad about leaving 2 extra, especially because someone else is going to come in right behind me and buy the remaining 2.
that makes sense. Yeah, when I bought my booster box from there, they got a shipment of 150 some odd decks, so I didn't feel too bad.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right. But I also, even though I'm kind of the bad guy, I wouldn't mind if they imposed a 1-2 deck rule, or especially because they get that shipment on Keyforge night. Stow that thing away until your Keyforge event, and use that as a promotion. You even post on Facebook just like, hey, Keyforge starts at 7, and we're putting 3 displays out at 7:00 p.m. and that'll freaking get people down there. I might even run that by him. I'm sure they're sick of hearing from me.
The event I went to on Sunday had like 20 people at it, which was nice. So lots of play and lots of different opponents. And I would guesstimate that probably like 50% of the people actually, while they were there, bought another couple of decks. Some people I know I played against literally were opening up their deck like in the minutes before the tournament started, even though they already had decks. They just wanted to play like, solo sealed, I guess, as an idea. So, obviously having that kind of event is good for sales of the product. So, I guess your idea of reverse engineering that idea of you want to buy Keyforge, come into the store while we're having an event. And that's the only time you can get Keyforge is actually like a pretty good and interesting one. It seems like a lot of the stores around Vancouver have been getting it in dribs and drabs. I know the store that's literally like 2 minutes from my house, was one of the only places you could get it for a little while. And because they're more of a board game store that I don't think any of like the standard card game players go to for any reason, they were able to keep it in stock for like a significant period of time. But now they're sold out. But now it seems like the larger stores have all got it back in stock. I don't think there's any shortage of product in the city. If you're looking for it, you can find it.
Right. That's been my experience as well. People like to talk about it like it's some super rare, super hot commodity right now, and it is. It's selling out in places, but the people that are going and selling decks that they've opened and they decide they don't like and are kind of objectively bad, that are selling those for $15 because you can't find it anywhere, I think that's nonsense. There's 3 stores around me, And when I wake up tomorrow, I could get a deck of Keyforge if I wanted to.
So with that though, if you don't mind me swapping gears a little bit, how do you think in your, just guessing, it is the season of giving. How do you think sales of Keyforge are gonna go with that, almost price gouging going on in the area? Like, like my family knows I'm enjoying Keyforge. I might get a Keyforge deck for Christmas, but I also don't want them paying $20, off of Amazon or something like that, where somebody is gouging. Do you think that's going to be a problem this season or just in general? Or
Yeah, I think I don't know. I'm sure some marketing genius knows way better than I do. I bet they did their homework a little bit, and when it came time to release it, so close to the holidays and stuff like that. But I don't think it'll be any more difficult than Tickle Me Elmo, whatever silly example you want to throw in there. That's just been kind of how Christmas works every single year. There's just stuff that's sold out just because of the timing. I think it's tricky because I don't know who the actual audience is going to be. I don't think anyone who's never played Keyforge is going to ask for Keyforge for Christmas. So I think that the people who ask for Keyforge for Christmas know a thing or two about it, and they can say, hey, mom, dad, I would really like some Keyforge, and I just happen to know Barnes and Noble has 20 decks in stock. I think they'll do the legwork and kind of provide that, or it's 2018, so old people are getting pretty tech savvy. People can hop on there on eBay and Amazon and find decent deals. I haven't actually looked at eBay to see what a sealed like non-opened, just a cardboard deck box, not one that's been open and the deck list isn't good and put back on eBay, but one that just hasn't been touched. I don't know how much they sell for, but probably for not too much more. I would feel like if you're buying your friend, your kid, whatever, a Christmas gift that costs $11 in the store and you pay $14 for it on eBay and you buy one of them, yeah, I don't think that's a terrible deal, and I don't think it'll stop people from getting their Christmas Keyforge. I also think if as long as you're not a lazy shopper, if you have an ample amount of warning, a couple weeks, you can figure out where to get the game locally. Your kid says, "Hey, I want Keyforge." If the parent's smart, they'll say, "Well, where do you get that?" But even if not, how many card shops, how many game shops in your area can you actually call? And then you've got the whole week. They'll tell you, "No, we get our shipment on Wednesday. Try back then." So it'll be trickier to get, but I don't think it'll be impossible.
I'll say this, in Canada right now, if you want to buy Keyforge via Amazon, the price is incredibly gougy. It's $25 Canadian for a sealed deck. And if you want the 12 pack of sealed decks, it is 200 Canadian dollars. Which isn't that.
yikes.
Yeah, no, it's super gougy right now. And, they will make sales on that because there will be people who left their Christmas shopping till very late and their significant other or their brother or their cousin or somebody else wants Keyforge for Christmas. And the only way they can get it is by using Amazon Prime to get it shipped to them, and they'll pay the premium just to have it for Christmas, which is a shame because I think one of the hugely appealing things about Keyforge is its affordability to get into, which is kind of what makes it a perfect stocking stuffer. Like I've literally bought Keyforge decks to give to people for Christmas this year as just like a very small, like, here you go. And if you want to play, let's play over the holidays. It'll be fun, so somebody taking advantage of that and then going deep on the price gouge is kind of antithetical to, I think, the way the game is kind of put out there. But we've already seen tons of price gouging and all kinds of weird, double horseman deck for X number of dollars and so on and so forth. So you can't ever really get away from that entirely, but bless the people who are still selling at MSRP because I would hope that that'll help build the game over the holidays.
Support your local game store. Buy from a reputable dealer.
Well, and the other thing I'll say about that is, people buying aren't stupid, and if they can't find, what they need, but they know the game store sells it reliably and consistently, gift cards exist. So, parents, whoever, grandparents can go out and buy a gift card, $20 gift card, and say, here you go, you do that legwork, you go call up there every day and find it, but here's the money for it.
So, do you think, just a straight yes or no, is there a price gouging problem that Keyforge has now, either because of rarity or stock or the holiday season?
Am I allowed to give a non-yes or no answer?
Yeah. I mean, it was just like a short, concise is what I was looking for.
Sure. I mean, there is price gouging. I wouldn't call it a problem. And it's to be expected with anything, anything collectible, anything collectible and anything new. And you combine something new and collectible together, and then it's just ripe for that, but like, I've talked about it on the show before, like, there's a market being created right now, and everyone's still feeling out every corner of it, and we're seeing what people want, what people don't want, what people are willing to pay, and like it's all kind of arbitrary right now. Like horseman decks were a good example, and it'd be interesting to see somebody kind of like map it all out, how quickly that declined. People were willing to pay $500 for it, and then a week later realized that, oh, horseman's not good, and now people are doing that with time travel. You have a good time traveler deck, and people give you $200 for it. So just like with that, and this is not short or concise like you asked for, I apologize, but I think there's some price. I don't even know if I'd call it gouging, because
Manipulation?
maybe, but that makes it sound like it's
That makes it sound worse than it is. You're right.
Well, or like there's some kind of ill intent behind it, and I think it's less about I think it's less a Tickle Me Elmo situation where it's like that mom will pay any amount of money for this Tickle Me Elmo, and more of just like I have some Keyforge and people want it, people are willing to pay a couple extra bucks, I'll sell my decks for $15 a piece, and I don't think it's a problem, and I guess I feel that way because like I said earlier, you can get it if you want it, it's not Tickle Me Elmo, it's not flying off the shelves. They sell quickly and they're difficult to find, but not impossible. So I almost don't feel bad if somebody goes out and, stupidly buys decks for $15 or, $25 or whatever it ends up being, because it's not impossible to get. It's just, you're just not doing your homework. You're being kind of lazy by, not calling around, not waiting a week for it to get back in stock. It's not a thing where, somebody has all of the water and you're dying of dehydration. It's more, there's water down the road, probably, there's a pool 2 miles away you can go get some water at, but you're lazy and you'd rather sit at home and, just look on eBay or Amazon or whatever. I don't know. That's kind of my thought on it, is I don't mind people playing with the market when it's, not the sole way you can acquire it.
And I agree with you on that. I mean, I'm one of the crazy people. I sold a Four Horsemen deck. It was the third deck that I opened up. I sold it opening the release day. It lasted 2 hours on eBay. Someone gave me $170, and I just reinvested it into Keyforge. I put a buy now at 170. I was like, all right. So I mean, if somebody wants it for this much, they can have it. If not, people will bid on it. I'll just reinvest some money in Keyforge, and I have now finally just put my own money back into Keyforge.
Mm-hmm. See, and my experience is the opposite. I opened a Keyforge deck on Friday, and nobody wants it. Nobody, I got a $25 offer on it. I told them, no, thank you. But that's fine. I don't think I want to play it. It's not particularly interesting. Maybe I'll do what you did and throw it on eBay and just see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, just starting at $10, and you at least make your money back if someone gets it. That was my only real thought. But
yeah, that's what I'll do. So we're going close to the hour mark. I have one more topic that ties in with the first thing we talked about with the Crucible cast. They discussed chains. So the concept of chains in game, you get assigned a certain amount of chains, and I think it's if you 1 through 6 chains, you draw one less card on your draw turn until you exhaust those chains, and each time you should draw, you shed one of those chains. If you're confused on that, just Google it. It's really simple, way simpler than I explained it. But there's a concept they're going to be introducing with this new app. It's going to track in both like tournament play and just casual play. You'll be able to track your wins, losses, like you as a player and each individual deck. There'll also be a power level component. I'll link the Crucible cast in the description so you guys can watch it. It's 18 minutes and I don't need to rehash the whole thing. But with that, they discussed chains, and this isn't new. It's not news. We've known about this. But decks that are too good will be assigned chains from the get-go. and I'm trying not to like inject any bias on it because I feel really strongly about it. But the question kind of comes up like, how does it how does it how do you feel about knowing that the deck that you get that may be like objectively the best deck in the game will also end up being the worst deck in the game? Like you will literally be punished for doing good. Do you I don't know, do you think it's fair? Do you agree with it? How do you intend to play around it? Just what are your thoughts on it in a whole?
I think it really depends on how they implement. Like, it's quite possible that they won't go necessarily, as strict with heavy chains on the best deck as we're all imagining that they're going to go. Um, I do think that it introduces an interesting element to the idea of organized play, which is do I bring a deck which I can pilot really well and that on paper isn't amazing, but that I know can perform, or do I bring my high powered deck and eat the chains just so that I can use what I feel like is, sort of the objectively better deck in my possession? I think that decision point is super interesting, and it'll be really interesting to see how FFG guides that as a principle within organized play.
The dilemma with what you just explained right there, though, is that chains won't be assigned based on the cards in the deck. It will be based on your win-loss. So in both of those scenarios, you'll be penalized with chains, assuming it's not a brand new deck.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea in the idea phase. I'm not too sure how well I like it in practice, because it feels like to me the absolute most amazing best deck that is ever going to come out of Keyforge, and the absolute worst deck that's just all artifacts that doesn't gain any amber, like absolute garbage. And they want these two decks to be at some point a 50-50 split on win-loss ratio. That's what I got from how they were talking about it and how they are like doing the game design of these pre-game chains. And in theory, it sounds great that at equal skill level, the best deck and the worst deck ever created will win 50% of the time. But at the same time, that very much sounds to me like it's a coin flip. If it's equal skill that is also being involved in this, and not how well you can pilot the deck, why don't you just flip a coin and save 40 minutes? Like, is the enjoyment of playing the game worth statistically a coin flip?
Right, and I don't like any of that. I hate that idea, because there's a way they could have presented Keyforge and made it like that. Make it like whatever they call that, the magic box, where it's got like 8 decks in it, and they're all in there. I'm not sure. They're like built to play each other. I think they sell them in individual packs too. You can buy 2 decks, and they're just built to be like super competitive and super fun together. If if that was what they wanted, they should have done that. Because if that's the case, like I don't know. I like to collect cards. I like to assemble decks. I have come to peace with the fact that I'm not able to do that in Keyforge. But if you just want to take out any you want to suck away any amount of like uncertainty, which is also the fun for me in like your deck may be good, it may be bad, you have to collect, you have to trade and buy new ones and figure out what works. If you want to take that away, that's great, but you would be killing a big portion of the game. And thankfully this will only exist in official tournaments, I assume.
And I believe it's only going to exist in lower level tournaments. I've heard from what it's been saying that the chained events are only up till Store Championship. They might change that later, and I might have been misremembering this, but I think it's only up until
Right.
Store Championship does the deck chains matter for it.
I would almost rather it be the opposite way. I'd rather it be up until that it doesn't chains don't exist, and then when you're getting to the real deal, then penalize the amazing players because they they know what they're doing, they can pilot a bad deck. But I don't know, I don't want that coin flip. I don't I want to be able to have the best deck, the best deck I can get. I want to be able to beat the people I encounter. I don't want it's not that I'm sour about losing or anything, but I don't want the kid that, you know, doesn't know how to play Keyforge and just opened his deck to beat me. Like it does suck away a lot of the fun for me. It's like okay, here's a weird example that is like not even fully thought out. Mario Kart. Especially Mario Kart on the Switch, I remember just felt so broken to me. I didn't play the Wii version. I didn't play the GameCube version. I went from, you know, N64, Mario Kart 64 to the Switch version. And I don't know if anyone else has done that, but in my experience, the items in Mario Kart for Switch are so broken. And by saying that, I mean, if you are the best player, if you are the best at Mario Kart, it doesn't matter because those broken items will throw you back to last place. It doesn't matter how skilled you are, how good you are at racing or avoiding or getting a lead. Just it's designed kind of like that 50-50 split you were saying with the chains to just, you know, to take away any advantage you have. And I don't like that. Like I like to be able to, you know, learn my deck and be good at it and, you know, be rewarded for that. And I don't want to be punished with this, you know, nuking of chains, you know, these chains nuking my deck and making it so impossible for me to succeed. Like, what's the point? Like you've you know, you're already on thin ice, you know, FFG, with the way you've kind of made this unique deck game, which is turning out really cool. I'm not complaining about that. But if you want to, you know, you only get to to wildly disrupt one corner of the, you know, card game market at a time. You know, you make it so people can't collect and customize their decks. That's great. So they have to go out and buy and, you know, buy more and more decks until they find the one that's perfect. Well, you can't have that concept and also penalize people so harshly for having a deck that succeeds. And I get it. Sometimes decks, you know, with the algorithm, it's not perfect, as we've seen with the names. You can have a broken deck. I'm sure decks exist out there that are just absolutely, you know, turn one broken. And, you know, maybe there should be a solution for that. But I guess, you know, I shouldn't be saying any of this until we learn how liberally chains are given out. Because, you know, maybe you know, maybe it's, you know, once you have a 10-to-1 ratio or something, I don't know what it would be. That's when you get a, you know, one chain or something like that. Maybe it's a really kind of lenient system.
I want to say that it was three. If you win 3 times in a row at a local or a store championship level, that's when it gets chained. It gets one chain for every 3 that you win in a row. One chain for every 3 times you win in a row, and you lose one chain every time you've lost 3 in a row. I don't quote me on this. I know I'm saying this on the internet where it's going to be here forever, but I think that is the way that they explained it from the last that I understood it.
And with that chain, it's like a permanent persistent chain. You don't shake it, you know, when you're supposed to draw, right?
You do, yes. You just start the game having chains, like you've played a card, like you've played Gateway to Dees, and it's going either you have the 3 chains and you start losing the chains when you would draw.
Right.
It's just acting as you start the game with a handicap. You can shake the chain eventually, but you start the game out.
Okay, that's what I was curious about. And you know, that doesn't make me feel any better. I think the idea of I think the idea of shaking with chains is interesting too. I think it'll just get abused. You'll have the person, you know, the person that's got the most broken deck they can find is, you know, if that's the system, that's not going to stop them. They're going to go to events and lose on purpose to get those chains shook, you know, to get rid of those chains if that's the system. I don't know. It doesn't sit right with me to be penalized for, you know, for being good. And like in my case, I don't have a broken deck. None of my decks are crazy good. I'm just good at playing them. And I don't think it's fair that my deck gets permanently, you know, I don't think it's good that it gets kind of penalized for me just playing it well. And it's also really dependent on like the people I'm playing against. Like, what if the people I'm playing against are just really bad? And then you're having people like, you know, throwing fights because like, man, I really don't want to get this penalized. I know there's a bigger tournament next week. Let me just throw this game. Like it seems like it'll disrupt gameplay more than it will make it fair.
I'll say this, to take it back to your Nintendo metaphor from earlier, one of the reasons that Mario Party and Mario Kart are designed the way they are is for the purposes of inclusivity. So the idea being that it doesn't matter if I'm a hardcore gamer and I'm playing against my grandma and my little cousin who have never played Mario Kart or Mario Party before, we're able to have fun because I'm just not stomping all over them. Not that I would stomp all over my grandmother or my little cousin. And that seems diametrically opposed to like card gaming culture at a tournament level. Like that's not the reason why people, I mean, sure, maybe for in-store events where you're just playing casually for fun, it makes sense, but on a tournament level, it seems very odd to me that they would want to implement it that way. I guess we're just going to have to really wait and see how it is that they implement it, how strict they are about what events require chaining, and also I think how hard it affects actual play. Like, does it drive people away from the game? I guess because there's a couple of people who I've mentioned this to is just sort of a casual, like, when they said, well, what do you do if you've got a bad deck or a super awesome deck? Doesn't that unbalance the game? And I said, well, change. And they're like, that doesn't sound that great to me. So, it's enough to actually turn some people off from the jump. So it'll be interesting to see.
And I mean, I'm gonna drop another Nintendo Forge podcast going on here. Smash Brothers, like they have in the same regard, you can set like handicaps for your different characters, like so you can make a game that is balanced and fun that you're playing at a casual level. But at the same time, and the same thing as if I want to do with Smash Brothers, I want to do the same thing in Keyforge. I don't mind if a couple cards, like say you have a combo that is really, really just is gross, and those two cards being in your deck gives you a chain or two for events. That's okay to me. It's not great. It doesn't fix the problem, but it's okay. But I don't want to be penalized for having more skill than my other competition. And I think that's where the key differential for me is. I wouldn't mind playing a deck that has chains if I have a combo that, if a certain 2 or 3 card combo is statistically winning 75% of the games, like that needs a little bit of a tweak. And that might be card balance design. That might get fixed in later sets where we have more of a balanced card pool where a lot of the cards this time feel like they're just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. But I don't want to be penalized for skill at a high ranked tournament.
Right. Well, and you brought up a good point. Is and I'll preface this by saying I'm not complaining. I don't care either way, really. I'm not as mad as I sound. And
I'm in the same boat.
Right. And this hasn't affected me personally. So I'm really just kind of speculating. But if I could make kind of a ruling on it, I would say, we shouldn't be punished for, a poor algorithm. If you're going to focus so much on this algorithm producing these cards and it's the algorithm doing this and that, well, take credit, take responsibility for that. Don't penalize us for, buying these decks. Like, I don't think for any reason, you can't have both these situations. You can't have the unique deck game where you buy one deck and that's what you play, or you buy another one. It can't be binary like that with the penalization system, even with what you described, which I think is more fair of just if you have a certain combo in your deck. Because, I imagine little Timothy that's, scrounged up every penny he has to buy this Keyforge deck, and he accidentally gets the best deck that you can buy. And, he's just screwed, and he doesn't have any money. He can't buy another deck. Like, he's just, he's penalized no matter what for, just for getting lucky, and he can't do anything about it. If your situation becomes true, he can't pull those restricted cards out and, avoid those chains. I just think it's BS. So what I would suggest, more than them kind of embracing this chain system, is make your algorithm, airtight for the next round, the next, set of cards. And then when a tournament comes out, perhaps they restrict it to, no, Call of the Archons decks. You have to play a deck from this new set. I'd be okay with that. I don't like the idea, I don't like the idea of being penalized for being good or having a good deck, or for my opponent being bad. Like, none of those things are mutually exclusive. But, if even one of those things is true, I don't think I should be penalized for any of those. I don't think that's fair.
Now, can I ask you this, though, real fast? Would you rather give yourself the chains at a local tournament? Be like, I know I'm better than little Timmy, but I want him to be on equal footing, so he at least says the thing. Would you be okay giving yourself the chains, or would you rather win the tournament?
If I'm playing in a tournament, no, I would rather not give myself chains. If I'm playing casual, if little Timmy's just starting out or, whatever, if I know my deck's good, I'll, sure. I would like it to be an unofficial kind of thing. Just like, hey, don't worry, I'll have, 7 chains. I'll help you out. But no, if I'm in a tournament, like that's kind of the point is like like you said, it would, if they have their way, it will become kind of a coin flip. And what's the point? It doesn't, and I guess a solution to this is sealed. Nobody's getting chains if they're sealed, unless unless they just go full wacky on it, and assign chains to players and not decks.
Oh, that'd be even worse. Oh,
which
man.
which I don't think that's the case, but that's how you'd get people to stop playing the game. And I don't know. I won't pretend to understand the relationship dynamics between like Richard Garfield and Magic and Richard Garfield and Keyforge and all that stuff. But if he hopes that the game becomes even half as popular as Magic and has an actual competitive scene and really kind of does something interesting and paves the way, you're going to totally push away so many of the competitive players with rules like that. Imagine imagine your tournament winner, world champion Magic player, and you tell me, like, hey, here's Keyforge, here's an interesting concept. And he says, oh, that's kind of cool. And says, oh, by the way, you're penalized really harshly for being good, and you're the best at Magic, so you're going to be really good at Keyforge. He's going to scoff at that and just say, no, I'm not going to touch that, no thanks. And you're going to really alienate that big portion of the market, which as far as card games go, especially a physical card game, if it's online, get weird with it. Sure, do whatever you want. But a physical card game, like these, both the card games themselves and the stores that kind of facilitate the events, they rely so much on these events bringing people in. Like that's how they survive. Like card games don't, I don't know if anyone knows this, but card stores don't survive by selling cards. They survive by hosting Magic tournaments. Like that's just how it works. And if you can't do that for Keyforge, the stores aren't going to support it. People aren't going to come to play it, and then people aren't going to come to buy it, and then they're not going to sell it at all, and it's just going to kill the game. And that's being really dramatic. I'll like re-say what I said again. Like I'm not actually right. I'm not mad about any of this. I'm not freaking out about it, but it is something to think about. And the reason I'm not like actually freaking out about it is because card game nerds are just like the most vocal, explosive kinds of people, just so quick to get angry about everything, so petty. And I mean that in the best way, that if they start, if FFG starts doing something stupid, especially because Keyforge is like so loved right now, it's not kind of an obscure card game that is just barely known. I think they'll fight, fight to the death when it comes to like letting their opinion be known. And if they try to do something stupid with chains, or the chains are too strict, you win 3 games in casual and you get 6 chains or something like that, I think people will freak out about it, and it'll correct itself pretty immediately. That's my hope.
I think in the perfect world, they will have it be so that every deck has a 50% ratio against each other, not factoring in skill. So your skill piloting the deck is what the determining factor is. So it's not a coin flip, and it's specifically based on your skill with the deck that you pilot, not the insane amount of cards that you can draw on a single turn or like these crazy combos. It is just specifically down to your skill. And I think that's the perfect world.
Yeah, like if we were to liken it to something like a golf handicap is purely for scoring. It's not like they say, well, you're a much better player than this person you're going up against, so you have to wear this cinder block around your neck attached to a chain. Like it shouldn't be an impediment on gameplay, I guess, is sort of the perspective that you guys seem to be espousing. And I agree with that entirely. I think I mostly just like it from the perspective of it provides a means to place a handicap on the game, which hopefully will prevent the situation that you have with other collectible card games like Magic, for example, where a deck combination comes out and stomps all over everybody, and then after a certain amount of time they just ban the cards out of it. You can't do that with Keyforge, because what are you gonna do, ban decks? not feasible. So I guess we'll really have to see how it gets implemented. It's not a perfect solution, but it's at least an interesting one to try and address that issue. We'll have to see what happens.
Right. Yeah. Well said. And it looks like we're at about the 1 hour mark, so I think we should call it for this episode. Thanks everyone for listening. This was episode 2 of Library Access. You can find us on YouTube, youtube.com/thekeyforge. We're also on anchor.fm, Library Access. You can search for us there. And we are everywhere podcasts are. We're on iTunes, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on Google Play, we're on Podbean, we're everywhere. Also check out thekeyforge.com, the #1 Keyforge fan site on the internet. If you guys have any suggestions for topics, anything you want covered, anything like that, let us know in the comments. We'll be happy to touch on them. But if not, we will see you guys next time, and thank you for listening.